All right, you white motherfuckers, all eyes on me. This is the I Refuse podcast. What's up, guys? It's Mr. Fox, the I Refuse podcast. I'm back. Chuck Norris passed away recently, and there's something that always happens lately when a celebrity passes away. A person, a human being that lives as long as like a Chuck Norris lives, or as long as I'm trying to think of another celebrity, or even the guy that passed away that was on Buffy, I think, in the comment section, and this is, I think, more so indicative of folks within my community, that and I know it's a generational thing because, not everybody evolves from an initial understanding or initial realization. They just kind of stick to this narrow window, and that's what they'll stick to until they too eventually evolve. But when Chuck Norris passed away at the age of 86, a kung fu martial arts action hero icon, somebody that has or was a like an icon in kung fu movies. I mean, anybody that comes across or mentions Bruce Lee, there are two or three people mentioned in the same breath. That's Chuck Norris, and there's a former basketball player that passed a long while back, like 10 to 15 years ago, that was in a similar position in a Bruce Lee movie fighting across from Bruce Lee. Um, People apparently want to get stuck into this, oh, well, this person or that person was mad. It's good that they're dead. It's yet another reminder of the state of the community where it's like we can't, for whatever reason, get out of our own way. There are some folks that have impulses that just undermine what we're supposed to represent as a community, right? We want people to believe that we're so progressive and so accepting, yet the moment a human being passes away, we like to run to the comment section and remind folks that because this person was a conservative, it's good that they're dead. Now, in the history of that term becoming a term, we have seen many examples from some of those folks that belies human dignity, that undermines um, just the classiness or what we understand patriotism to be. Even though, in parallel, history in this country repeats itself, and much of that movement was pretty much an extension of empowerment, of beliefs, behind beliefs and attitudes that this country was built on. Yeah, yeah, like it definitely has been a decade or so of revelations. People getting caught up into the media and viewing the world one way. And getting heavier and heavier into stereotypes when it comes to marginalized folks. And over time, and I have mentioned this on the podcast several times, folks close to me, folks that I've known since I was a teenager, having voted for Trump the first time. And I'm like, in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, you had in the shadow of that man going up to the podium and targeting certain folks and making a mockery of other human beings has opened the door to empower others to kill and murder people that look like me. So walk me through this as to how you that has a black person as a friend of yours, one of your best friends, that's also gay, bisexual, part of the community, that you would vote for this man. And 98% of the time, it's initially ignorance. A lot of these folks live and breathe their whole entire life in this one block, residential block. They don't travel to other countries, they don't see other cultures and ethnicities beyond what the news has been telling them. Mind you, as long as I've been alive, the news, there are certain channels that have a narrative with the news that they report specifically for a targeted audience, right? So, in my evolution of life and society since MAGA has become a thing, I've come to realize that there are some nuances. A person that votes for a Republican is not all a terrible human being. A person that is conservative is not a terrible human being. So, from my perspective, Mr. Fox Therapy's podcast, when we have a celebrity that dies, and yet again, folks in the community tend to be very dismissive. Yet, for some odd reason, wants to be the smartest person or the person that people look to. And damn it, another in the climate, in the climate of, well, somebody else said it, so it's got to be true. 86 years of age, an actor, a action mixed martial arts athlete. Those are the first couple of things that come to mind. It is not uncommon for people that get to a certain tax bracket to essentially put money first. And that's how I deem most conservatives to be. And this is just my opinion. He's not the first, nor will he be the last. People, when they get to a certain age or they get around to rubbing shoulders with other folks in a particular tax bracket, there's conversations had, there are views shared, um, but that is not a reflection of everybody. Think about it. When you think of the term dismissive, people, whether they want to admit it or not, are placing generalizations on folks, not people that they know or are familiar with, in the same vein that they don't want to be generalized. The same folks that in the community we don't want, we're exhausted and we're tired of being labeled as predators and labeled as villains and labeled as you know any derogatory terms you can think of. But in the same breath, people are glad that Chuck Norris is dead because he was Meg in their opinion. So such confusing times to be part of. For me, I grew up living for kung fu movies. Just about once or two Sundays a month growing up, they would have a kung fu triple feature. It would be two Bruce Lee movies. Return of the Dragon was always one of them. Enter the Dragon was the second one, was in there as well. Um, and then there was like a third one. But Bruce Lee was all up and through just about every black person's childhood, either mine or a person probably 5 or 10 years older than me. And an extension of that was Chuck Norris was part of that. And I still can't think of the name of the former basketball player. I can see him, but I just his name. So for me, it's like, we have this conversation about can we separate the artists from their beliefs or their political association. You know, it trips me out because this is one of those things where people dip their toe or a couple of toes into being discriminatory. Chuck Norris did not essay women, did not abuse children, did not murder Africans. Chuck Norris didn't do anything criminal. But because he was a conservative, it's good that he's dead. When you think of all the things we've heard over the years that people can be and people are, it's good that he's dead because he was allegedly MAGA. Really? It's like, y'all want the credit, but I don't want to take the responsibility. And maybe I'm a little bit biased, but it's so interesting. Those comment sections under the post and under the story sometimes, and not just related to celebrity deaths, but anything. Y'all shows y'all slip every time. You know, for me, I'm about 10 years in with the evolution. And if you're just now joining, this is bigger than Chuck Norris. This is more an assessment and a criticism of folks, really. Um, you know, as we evolve in this crazy world, in this crazy tunnel called life, I'm often reminded that even as some folks get older, year after year, breathing in air, expelling air from their bodies, have we not learned anything? You know, MAGA is dead. Yeah, people still have the red hats, but since law and order has been in some states taking effect and people openly who used to be, openly through their badges or through their profession killing killing black people on film and being convicted of it, nobody is even having a discussion around that. It's that movement and that empowerment and flexing one supremacy out of the bounds of moral ethics, professionalism, and conduct unbecoming. It There has to be a counteraction. You know what I mean? There has to be a guardrail and a control. Less and less people are saying defund the police and realizing, oh, if we actually highlight more of this, something may actually happen. That may not be the case in every state, and that may not be the case in every jurisdiction. But, however, mark my words, at some point, a lot of the hypocrisy is going to turn on itself. It's going to turn over on itself and it's going to cancel itself out. So, for me, part of my evolution is being observant and watching and listening and the things they teach you in school. I mean, God forbid I ever get to a point in my life that I'd say or piggyback or concur with somebody else that it's good that somebody's father and grandfather died because they were conservative. That's a great way to get the conversation together and bring us together, right? 86 years of age, Chuck Norris, an icon. You don't have to believe what I believe for us to have a conversation and for us to be friends. The maturity, I think, is also what's lacking. Um, just my 2 cents. I don't make the rules. I just know that, what works for other people doesn't have any emotion for me. And at the end of the day, does anybody care that you think it's good that an elderly man died? Let alone your miseducation that you can't distinguish the conservative from the MAGA. Um, it, it's a cycle. It's a cycle of ignorance. It's a cycle of very, very telling a slip that some folks just sit home, watch the news, and do their embroidery and, you know, do high markups on their inventory. Go to these events and go to these spaces and really, really think we're gonna buy some of that stuff. It's like, my goodness. If anything, I should be calling the authorities on y'all because this is robbery. It's just wild, man. In the community, you have folks that are probably older than me, trying to keep up with the younger kids and influenced by the younger kids who lead them to they themselves are ignorant or short sighted, have a short sighted view of the world. And it's like, since when do we become, or since when did some of y'all become the expert on people that have been here longer than you? And you know exactly what you're talking about. I'm telling you, those impulses of being mean and mean spirited and devaluing folks and reducing folks by what they believe when you don't even have all the details. Very, very weird and confusing time, if you ask me. Um, and then there's this other trend. Now, in this I Refuse podcast, it's essentially me speaking and me sharing my views and my thoughts as an individual. So, question to the audience, right? Question to the audience. A person has been dead. Person has been dead almost, damn, 40 years. Oh, it hold on. It finally came on. Took about 5 to 7 business days. So a person has been dead almost 40 years. An activist, a person of color, a minority, who without their activity, you probably would have never had a union or government aid or law protections for farm laborers, for farm workers. Um, Very impactful, right? This man has been dead 40 some years. At some point this month, this person who's been dead since the early 90s is, well, facing allegations. Well, technically, he's facing the ground. He's facing the top of the casket. Um, but if you are just now joining the I Refuse podcast, right? This trend continues of revising history. And, I think it's very important to have some nuance, right? They tried it with Smokey Robinson. When Smokey Robinson, who's still alive, filed suit, everything went away magically. And there's definitely a distinction between you trying to convince us that you were forced to have sex with Smokey Robinson. But when you get into the details, you laying across a towel on your own free will, come on. So when it comes to Mr. Chavez, right, there is more traction off of that's come out of this from this one lady who said that he essayed her back in the 60s. And bef- before that came to a head in the news, there was rumblings that allegedly Cesar Chavez was fooling around with like girls as young as 11 and 12 years of age. And I got to thinking, I'm like, that man ain't even here. And you gotta you also got to keep in mind that we live in a time right now where a professional adulterers from human resources that were busted at a Coldplay concert are now sitting on Good Morning America shows, Good Morning shows, and are sitting across from Oprah Winfrey and getting model shoots and all this other stuff. Yeah, y'all do realize that, right? So here it is in light of all of this, they have changed the name of some of the days that bear his name. They have renamed other things. They have canceled events, things of that nature. Because you stand with women, and it's like my question was, in the midst of all that, how did y'all arrive to this? So I just paused to give y'all a chance. How did y'all arrive to this? I mean, you can't go exhume the man and ask him. Now, I am not condoning anything that man has done. I wasn't in the time machine to go back and confirm the shit. I just want to ask the audience and the powers that be, how did you arrive to this? And why after the man's been dead for so long? Or why after the man passed away? Since from back in the 60s, that's how mobs get started and shit happens. I'm very curious to ask the audience, how did we get here as a society? There are definitely some, a lot of legitimate and heinous things that have happened to women and men and children. And in response to that, the people that are out here perpetrating and preying on men, women, and children should be thrown under the jail. But I have to ask you a question. You can't tell me that you weren't thinking like, the fuck? They I can kind of understand that you don't want to sully his good name, but you do realize that's what happened. And the man's been dead 40 years. I don't know about you, but we doing this while we both alive. Some people, I know that the point of talking after the fact or revising history or talking behind somebody's back, or in this case, talking over a dead body, there's part of me that believes that people do that shit because they don't expect a response. A dead person, of course, is not going to respond. And they damn sure are not going to feel any of the shit that you're doing or any of the changes you've made. And so, what's been interesting for me in the days since the news broke, that the lady said that he had essayed her back in the 60s, was that I have people on my timeline that are sharing their own story where they look back in hindsight. It's always the hindsight, right? That this little girl over here, when they were there reporting the news and then we were in the same room with Cesar Chavez, they knew something was off. I'm like, what do you want us to do with this information in 2026? My thing is, what is the end game or the goal in all of this? You want people to have their day in court and you want to punish folks. The man's been dead 40 some years. But I'll tell you what though, it the other thing that's very prominent in the climate is that you get book deals, you get movies, you get a lot of commercial and financial benefit as an activist that's doing this for the love of human rights. And I thought to myself, I'm like, do the ends justify the means? Like, it's one thing you want to tell the stories of the victims, which is very, very important. Then you get to a point where you get book deals and movie deals, you get awards, you get time and the light, a distraction from the activism. And it's like, what was all of this for? The man's been dead 40 some years. Can somebody help me out? Can somebody help me out? If it's absolutely true, I mean, exhume the man and do some with him. But see, there's no way of knowing. Fendi, like the bag. This is the hour.